Red and blue lights flashed in the rearview mirror, piercing the humid Georgia night. Supervisory Special Agent Maya Reynolds knew the drill. Keep your hands on the wheel. Don't make sudden movements. But the officer storming toward her window wasn't looking for safety. He was looking for a target. He saw a black woman in a beat-up sedan in an affluent neighborhood and made his choice. He thought he caught a victim. He had no idea he had just pulled over the FBI's apex predator. The sprawling, manicured estates of Oak Creek, Georgia, were bathed in the soft, ethereal glow of wrought-iron street lamps. It was the kind of neighborhood where the median income was whispered rather than spoken, where private security vehicles patrolled the cul-de-sacs, and where anyone who didn't fit the local demographic was closely monitored. Supervisory Special Agent Maya Reynolds was well aware she didn't fit the demographic. Driving a dusty, unwashed 2012 Chevy Impala, Maya navigated the winding suburban roads with the quiet precision of a ghost. The car was an intentional choice. As the lead investigator for the FBI's Regional Public Corruption Task Force, she was currently knee-deep in an operation targeting Oak Creek's City Council. Councilman Arthur Pendleton had been funneling municipal funds into offshore accounts through a network of shell companies, and Maya had spent the last 14 hours sitting in a sweltering surveillance van, logging his every move. She was exhausted. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight utilitarian bun, and her tailored charcoal blazer lay discarded on the passenger seat, leaving her in a plain white button-down. She just wanted to get back to her hotel, take a long shower, and review the wiretap transcripts. But as she signaled to turn onto a major arterial road leading toward the interstate, the unmistakable, jarring burst of a police siren shattered the quiet night. Maya glanced at her rearview mirror. The blinding strobes of a local Oak Creek police cruiser filled her cabin, casting harsh, alternating shadows across her face. She let out a slow, controlled breath. She checked her speedometer. She was doing 32 in a 35 zone. Her tags were up to date, although they were registered to a government ghost company. Her tail lights were functioning perfectly. There was no legitimate traffic violation. Stay calm. Play it out, she told herself. She activated her turn signal, slowly pulling the Impala onto the wide, well-paved shoulder. She shifted into park, turned off the engine, and placed both hands firmly on the top of the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 positions. It was a muscle memory born of both her federal law enforcement training and the stark reality of being a black driver in America. In the side mirror, the driver's door of the cruiser swung open. Out stepped Officer Travis Higgins. Higgins was a man who wore his authority like a heavy, suffocating cologne. He was in his late 20s, built with the thick, rigid posture of a former high school linebacker who never quite let go of his glory days. His uniform was pressed to military perfection, his tactical belt bristling with gear. As he walked toward Maya's vehicle, his hand rested casually but pointedly on the butt of his sidearm. It was a swagger Maya had seen 1,000 times in local precincts, the walk of a big fish in a very small, very privileged pond. He didn't approach the window immediately. Instead, he lingered by the trunk, shining his high-powered tactical flashlight directly into her rear view and side mirrors, intentionally trying to blind her. He tapped his heavy maglite against the rear tail light, a classic intimidation tactic meant to assert physical dominance over the vehicle. Finally, Higgins arrived at the driver's side window. Maya pressed the button and the glass rolled down, letting in the thick, humid southern air. Before she could speak, the blinding beam of the flashlight hit her directly in the eyes. "You lost, sweetheart?" Higgins's voice was a slow, dripping drawl, laced with a condescension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Maya squinted, turning her face slightly away from the center of the beam. "Good evening, officer. Could you please lower the light? It's blinding." Higgins didn't move the light an inch. If anything, he leaned in closer, invading her space. "I asked you a question. What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Maya kept her voice entirely devoid of emotion, a flat, professional bass line that usually unsettled aggressive suspects. "I'm driving back to my hotel, officer. Was I speeding?" "I don't remember asking you for a summary of your travel itinerary," Higgins snapped, his tone darkening. He dragged the beam of the flashlight over the interior of her car, lingering on the discarded blazer, a few fast food wrappers on the floorboard, and finally back to her face. "This is a private community. We've had a string of burglaries lately. People driving beat-up cars they can't afford, creeping around where they don't belong." Maya felt the familiar, icy prickle of anger at the back of her neck, but she pushed it down into a tightly sealed box. She had spent 15 years in the bureau. She had interrogated cartel sicarios, stared down white-collar sociopaths, and navigated the treacherous, male-dominated waters of federal law enforcement. She was not about to lose her composure over a small-town bully with a badge. "This is a public road, officer," Maya corrected gently, though her voice carried a distinct edge of authority. "And I assure you, I am not lost. Now why did you pull me over?" Higgins scoffed, dropping the flashlight beam just enough so she could see the sneer twisting his features. He rested his forearms on the windowsill, a blatant violation of officer safety protocols, signaling that he didn't view her as a threat, but merely as prey. "You swerved," Higgins lied smoothly, without a microsecond of hesitation. "Crossed the double yellow line, back by Elm Street. Plus, your license plate light is out." Maya knew for a fact that neither statement was true. Her undercover vehicle was meticulously maintained by the Bureau's motor pool, inspected daily. "I see," Maya said softly. "License and registration," Higgins demanded, snapping his fingers impatiently. "And let's make it quick. Don't go reaching under the seats." Maya didn't immediately reach for her federal credentials. In undercover operations, standard procedure dictated maintaining the cover unless safety or operational integrity was compromised. Furthermore, a part of her, the part that had grown tired of seeing cops like Higgins abuse their power, wanted to see exactly how far he would take this. She wanted to document his behavior. After all, investigating corrupt officials in Oak Creek might just need to include the local police department. "My license is in my wallet, in my purse on the passenger seat," Maya stated clearly, narrating her movements as she slowly reached over. She unzipped the leather tote and extracted her Georgia driver's license, issued under her cover name, Maya Collins. She handed the plastic card to Higgins. He snatched it from her fingers, holding it up to the glare of his flashlight. He scrutinized the photo, then looked down at her, his eyes cold and mocking. "Maya Collins. Address is all the way out in East Atlanta. That's a long, long way from Oak Creek, Maya. You cleaning houses out here? Working a late shift?" The sheer audacity of the racial profiling hung in the air, heavy and toxic. He couldn't fathom a black woman being in Oak Creek for any reason other than servitude. Maya met his gaze squarely, her dark eyes flashing with a dangerous, quiet intelligence that Higgins was far too arrogant to recognize. "I'm here for work, officer," Maya said, her voice dropping an octave, radiating a quiet menace. "Now, are you going to write me a citation for this alleged swerving, or are we going to sit here in the dark all night?" Higgins's jaw tightened. The casual disrespect from someone he deemed beneath him was a direct blow to his fragile ego. The sneer faded into a hard, angry line. "You got a smart mouth on you," Higgins growled, tapping the license against his palm. "Sit tight. Keep your hands on the wheel. You twitch, we're going to have a serious problem." He turned and stalked back to his cruiser. Maya watched him in the rearview mirror. She watched him slide into the driver's seat, watched the glow of his mobile data terminal illuminate his face as he typed in her cover name. She knew what he would find. Nothing. A pristine driving record, no warrants, no criminal history. A ghost profile meticulously crafted by the DOJ. But Maya also knew that for a cop like Higgins, finding nothing wouldn't be a relief. It would be an insult. It would mean he couldn't immediately justify his prejudice, and that meant he was about to escalate. She reached slowly toward her center console, her fingers brushing the hidden compartment where her FBI badge and credentials rested alongside her issued Glock 19. She didn't draw them out yet. She simply readied herself for the storm. Inside the Oak Creek police cruiser, Officer Travis Higgins was fuming. He aggressively punched the keys on his laptop, running the name Maya Collins through the state database, then the national NCIC database. No warrants, no prior arrests, not even a damn parking ticket. Higgins hit the steering wheel with the heel of his hand. He hated drivers like her, the ones who looked at him without fear, the ones who spoke with that crisp, educated tone that quietly mocked his authority. He had expected her to tremble, to stutter, to apologize profusely, and beg for a warning. That was how the game was played. He applied the pressure, they crumbled, and he got to feel like the undisputed king of the concrete. But this woman in her trashy Chevy had looked right through him. "Thinks she's untouchable," Higgins muttered to himself, the dim light of the laptop reflecting in his narrowed eyes. Probably some civil rights lawyer's assistant trying to bait me. He wasn't going to let it slide. He couldn't. If he let her drive away with a warning, she won. In Higgins's mind, a traffic stop wasn't about public safety. It was a dominance display. He decided he was going to tear her car apart. He would find something, a stray pill, an open container, maybe just claim he smelled marijuana. That was the golden ticket. I smelled an odor consistent with burnt cannabis. Once he said those words, her Fourth Amendment rights evaporated into the humid Georgia night. Higgins grabbed his radio mic. "Dispatch Unit 4. I've got a 1038 on Oak Creek Boulevard, requesting a secondary unit for backup. Driver is being uncooperative. Going to initiate a vehicle search." "Copy, Unit 4. Unit 7 is en route. ETA 3 minutes. The dispatcher's voice crackled back. Higgins smiled grimly. He turned off the laptop, stepped out of the cruiser, and adjusted his heavy gun belt, making sure the metal buckles clinked loudly. He wanted her to hear him coming. Back in the Impala, Maya watched him approach through the side mirror. His body language had changed. The casual swagger was gone, replaced by a rigid, aggressive forward lean. The hunter was moving in for the kill. "Step out of the vehicle," Higgins commanded loudly as he reached her window, completely abandoning any pretense of a routine traffic stop. Maya didn't move. She kept her hands draped casually over the steering wheel. "On what grounds, officer?" "I don't need grounds to order you out of the vehicle." "Pennsylvania vs. Mims," Higgins quoted, a smug smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He loved throwing case law at civilians. It usually shut them up instantly. "It's for officer safety. Now pop the door and step out, or I will drag you out." Maya was intimately familiar with Pennsylvania versus Mims, a Supreme Court ruling that indeed allowed an officer to order a driver out of a vehicle during a lawful traffic stop. But the stop itself had been manufactured based on a fabricated traffic violation. Still, arguing constitutional law on the side of a dark road with an armed, agitated officer was a fool's errand. "I am stepping out," Maya said calmly. "I am unbuckling my seatbelt now." She moved slowly, deliberately, ensuring every motion was telegraphed. She unclicked the belt, pulled the door handle, and stepped out onto the pavement. Despite the sweltering heat, Maya looked entirely unbothered. Standing at 5'9", she was tall, and her posture was impeccably straight. She looked Higgins dead in the eye, not shrinking an inch. "Turn around and place your hands on the roof of the car," Higgins barked, stepping into her personal space, trying to use his bulk to intimidate her. "Am I being detained, or am I under arrest?" Maya asked, her voice ringing out clearly in the quiet street. "You're being detained," Higgins sneered. "I smell marijuana coming from inside the vehicle. I have probable cause to search it." Maya almost laughed. It was the oldest, most pathetic lie in the corrupt cop playbook. "You do not smell marijuana, officer. Neither of us smokes. Furthermore, you do not have my consent to search this vehicle." "I don't need your damn consent!" Higgins shouted, finally losing his temper. The polished veneer of the lawman vanished, revealing the petulant, prejudiced bully underneath. He grabbed Maya's left arm roughly, intending to spin her around. Maya's reaction was instantaneous and entirely instinctual. Before Higgins could lock his grip, she executed a fluid, defensive parry. She didn't strike him, but she twisted her arm with a sharp, practiced torque that broke his hold effortlessly, stepping back a half pace to create a tactical distance. Higgins stumbled forward slightly, his eyes widening in shock. Civilians didn't know how to break a wrist grab like that. "Do not touch me," Maya said. Her voice was no longer conversational. It was a command, carrying the heavy, chilling authority of a woman who commanded federal SWAT teams. "You have crossed a line, Officer Higgins. I highly suggest you step back and call your shift commander to this location immediately." Higgins's face flushed a deep, violent crimson. His hand flew to his holster, unsnapping the retention strap. "You just assaulted a police officer. You are under arrest. Get on the ground. Face down on the ground, now." "An unlawful physical contact," Maya corrected, her eyes dropping to his hand on his weapon. "If you draw that firearm, officer, your career will end tonight, and you will spend the next 10 years in federal prison. That is not a threat. That is a guarantee." "Federal prison?" Higgins let out a wild, incredulous laugh. He was practically vibrating with rage. "You think because you use big words you scare me? You're nothing. You're a nobody in a ghetto cruiser driving through my town. On the ground now!" Sirens wailed in the distance, growing rapidly louder. Backup was arriving. Maya knew the window to de-escalate was closing rapidly. Once the second unit arrived, herd mentality would take over. If Higgins drew his gun, the arriving officers would likely draw theirs, creating a high-stress, potentially lethal crossfire situation. It was time to end the charade. "I am reaching into my front left trouser pocket," Maya announced, in a loud, booming voice that echoed off the nearby brick walls of the estates. "I am retrieving my credentials. I am a supervisory special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Higgins froze, his hand still hovering over his sidearm. He blinked, the words struggling to penetrate his rage-clouded brain. "What did you say?" Maya slowly, with just her thumb and index finger, reached into her pocket. She pulled out a sleek, black leather flip case. With a sharp flick of her wrist, she flipped it open. The heavy gold FBI shield caught the beam of Higgins's flashlight, gleaming brilliantly in the darkness. Beside the badge was her DOJ identification card, bearing her photo, the Department of Justice seal, and the bold letters, Supervisory Special Agent. "My name is Maya Reynolds," she said, her voice cutting through the humid air like a scythe. "I am the lead investigator for the FBI Public Corruption Task Force out of the Atlanta field office. You have just illegally detained a federal agent, fabricated a traffic violation, and falsified probable cause. Now, take your hand off your weapon, step back to your vehicle, and call your captain." For 3 agonizing seconds, The only sound on Oak Creek Boulevard was the rhythmic chirp of crickets and the distant, approaching wail of sirens. Higgins stared at the gold badge. He looked at Maya's face, then back at the badge. His brain, heavily conditioned by his own bias and arrogance, simply refused to compute the information. A black woman in a broken-down Chevy couldn't be a federal agent. She just couldn't be. It shattered his entire worldview, and cognitive dissonance is a powerful, blinding force. He let out a sharp, derisive bark of laughter, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of frantic uncertainty. "Nice try," Higgins sneered, taking a step forward and pointing a thick finger at the badge. "You can buy those things on Amazon for $20. You really think I'm that stupid? You think waving a fake badge is going to save you from a felony-resisting charge?" Maya didn't put the badge away. She held it steady, right in his line of sight. "Look at the seal, Higgins. Look at the watermarks on the ID card. If you arrest me, you are kidnapping a federal officer. Do you understand the severity of the statutes you are currently violating?" "Shut up!" Higgins yelled, his voice cracking slightly. He was in too deep now. He had to double down. If he backed off, he was admitting he had just racially profiled and assaulted a senior FBI agent. His ego couldn't handle the sheer magnitude of that mistake. "Turn around! Hands behind your back!" Tires screeched as an Oak Creek police SUV slammed to a halt behind Higgins's cruiser. The doors burst open, and two rookie officers sprang out, hands on their holsters, scanning the scene for the threat their senior officer had called in. "Higgins, what have we got?" the first rookie yelled, jogging forward. "We got a suspect resisting arrest and impersonating a federal officer," Higgins shouted back, feeling emboldened by his backup. "She's got a fake badge. Help me cuff her." The two rookies slowed down as they approached, their eyes darting between Higgins's aggressive posture and the remarkably calm, poised woman standing by the Impala. "Officer Higgins," Maya said, projecting her voice so the two new arrivals could hear every word. "I want you to listen to me very carefully. My badge number is 449 Alpha Echo. You have a radio on your shoulder. Call your dispatch. Have them run that number through the NCIC Federal Registry. It will take 30 seconds. One of the rookies, a young guy who looked barely out of the academy, swallowed hard. He looked at the gold shield in Maya's hand. Even from 10 feet away, it looked terrifyingly real. "Travis," the rookie said hesitantly, "maybe we should just run the number. If she's lying, it's an extra charge." "I don't need to run a damn thing," Higgins snapped, rounding on his junior partner. "I know a fake when I see one. She's stalling. Grab her right arm." Maya's expression hardened into granite. The time for warnings was over. "If either of you lay a hand on me, I will have you indicted for deprivation of rights under color of law, conspiracy, and assaulting a federal officer," Maya said, her voice dropping into a deadly, quiet register that made the rookies freeze in their tracks. "My team is currently running a massive federal wiretap operation in your jurisdiction. Do you really want to be the collateral damage because your senior officer has a god complex?" The mention of a wiretap operation hit the rookies like a bucket of ice water. Higgins, however, was beyond reason. His pride was a runaway train. He grabbed his shoulder mic, glaring at Maya with pure, unadulterated venom. "Dispatch Unit 4, Higgins barked. "I need Captain Callahan down here right now. I've got a suspect claiming to be FBI, threatening officers with federal charges. I want command on scene before I put her in the back of my car." "Copy, Unit 4. Be advised, Captain Callahan is already in the vicinity and monitoring the channel. He is en route to your location." Higgins dropped the mic, a triumphant smirk spreading across his face. Captain Robert Callahan was a legend in Oak Creek. He was an old-school, hard-nosed cop who didn't take any disrespect from civilians. Higgins was certain that once Callahan arrived, he would take one look at this woman, laugh at her fake badge, and personally throw her in the back of the cruiser. You're done, Higgins whispered to Maya, stepping back and crossing his arms. Captain's going to string you up. You're going to wish you just took the speeding ticket. I look forward to meeting him, Maya replied calmly. She finally lowered her badge, letting the leather case snap shut, and slid it back into her pocket. She leaned comfortably against the side of her Impala, crossing her arms in a mirror of Higgins's posture, completely unfazed. For the next 2 minutes, a tense, suffocating silence fell over the scene. The two rookies stood awkwardly off to the side, looking entirely miserable, silently praying they weren't about to lose their pensions before their careers even started. Higgins paced back and forth, shooting venomous glares at Maya, trying to project a confidence he was rapidly losing. Maya just watched the road, her face a mask of absolute serenity. Then the deep, guttural roar of a heavy engine echoed down the boulevard. An unmarked, jet-black Ford Explorer came tearing around the corner, its hidden grille lights flashing a furious red and blue. It didn't pull up slowly. It slammed on the brakes, the heavy tires skidding on the asphalt, coming to a halt at a sharp angle right in front of Maya's Impala, effectively boxing in the scene. The driver's side door flew open, and Captain Robert Callahan stepped out into the humid night. Callahan was a massive man in his mid-50s, with closely cropped grey hair, a thick mustache, and shoulders as wide as a doorway. He wore a crisp white uniform shirt with gold oak leaves on the collar, his captain's badge gleaming under the streetlights. He looked like a man who chewed gravel for breakfast and breathed fire. Higgins immediately stood taller, puffing out his chest. He took a step toward his commanding officer, pointing a triumphant finger at Maya. "Captain," Higgins called out. "Good timing. This suspect was driving erratically. I pulled her over. She got combative, and then she tried to pull a fake FBI badge on me to get out of it. She's been threatening us with federal charges." Callahan didn't even look at Higgins. His eyes were locked squarely on Maya Reynolds. The heavy, imposing captain walked past the flashing lights of Higgins's cruiser, past the two terrified rookies, and past Higgins, who was standing there with a smug grin. Callahan stopped 3 feet in front of Maya. The silence was absolute. You could hear a pin drop on the asphalt. Higgins waited for the explosion. He waited for Callahan to bark an order, to slap the cuffs on the imposter. Instead, Captain Robert Callahan did something that made Higgins's blood run entirely cold. Callahan snapped to attention, brought his right hand up to the brim of his uniform cap, and rendered a crisp, perfect military salute. "Agent Reynolds," Captain Callahan said, his gravelly voice echoing loudly in the quiet street, filled with nothing but absolute respect. "My profound apologies. Are you injured?" The humid Georgia night seemed to freeze entirely. The rhythmic flashing of the red and blue police strobes washed over Officer Travis Higgins's face, illuminating a complexion that had suddenly drained of all its blood. He stared at Captain Callahan's hand, rigid against the brim of his cap. He stared at the imposing, legendary police veteran who bowed to no one, currently rendering a crisp military salute to a black woman in a beat-up Chevy. Higgins's mouth opened, but only a dry, breathless croak emerged. The cognitive dissonance was so absolute, or so violently contradictory to everything he had believed just 10 seconds prior, that his brain practically short-circuited. Maya Reynolds slowly pushed herself off the side of the Impala. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply offered a sharp, curt nod, the universal law enforcement acknowledgement of command presence. "I am uninjured, Captain Callahan," Maya said, her voice a calm anchor in the center of the storm. "Though my patience with your patrol division has been severely tested." Callahan dropped his salute, turning his massive frame slowly toward Higgins. The look in the captain's eyes was not just anger. It was a cold, calculating fury. It was the look of a man watching a cancer reveal itself within his own house. "Captain," Higgins stammered, stepping forward, his hands trembling slightly as they hovered near his duty belt. "Captain, she's lying. I swear to God, she's an imposter. Look at her car. Look at her. You're being played, sir." "Shut your mouth, Higgins." Callahan's voice didn't rise to a shout, but the gravelly, resonant boom of it hit like a physical blow. "Before you add another 10 years to your federal sentence, shut your damn mouth." Higgins recoiled as if he had been slapped. The two rookies, standing several paces away, instinctively took a synchronized step backward, wanting no part of the blast radius. Callahan turned back to Maya, his posture deferential. "Agent Reynolds, my special agent in charge at the Atlanta field office, briefed me on your task force's operational presence in Oak Creek 3 weeks ago. I was told you were working a sensitive Title III wiretap on municipal targets. I gave my word to Director Ray's office that my department would offer full, uncompromised cooperation and stay completely out of your way." "You did, Captain," Maya replied, smoothing down the front of her white button-down. Unfortunately, Officer Higgins decided to take it upon himself to protect Oak Creek's borders from anyone who didn't fit his preferred demographic profile. Higgins's mind was racing, desperately trying to find a way out of the trap that had just slammed shut on his leg. Title III wiretap? Atlanta field office? He was a bully, but he wasn't entirely stupid. He knew what a Title III meant. It meant federal judges. It meant the FBI had been listening to everything. "Captain, she crossed the double yellow," Higgins lied again, his voice pitching higher in sheer panic. "Her tag light is out. I had reasonable suspicion for a pretextual stop. It's all by the book." Maya walked past Callahan, closing the distance between herself and Higgins until she was standing a mere 2 feet from him. Higgins, despite towering over her by several inches, seemed to physically shrink under her gaze. "Did you know, Officer Higgins," Maya said, her tone conversational but laced with lethal intent, "that my Impala is heavily modified by the FBI's engineering research facility in Quantico? It is equipped with front, rear, and cabin-facing high-definition cameras, all of which stream directly to a secure server at the Atlanta field office. It also records telemetry data. I can prove, down to the exact millimeter, that my vehicle never crossed the center line. I can prove my tag lights were functioning perfectly." Higgins swallowed hard, an audible gulp in the quiet street. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple, cutting a path through the grease on his face. "I can also prove," Maya continued, stepping even closer, "that you initiated this stop solely based on my race, in a deliberate attempt to intimidate and harass me. You falsified probable cause by claiming to smell marijuana. You illegally ordered me out of my vehicle under false pretenses. You unlawfully laid hands on a federal officer, and you threatened me with a firearm." "I didn't draw," Higgins yelped, a desperate plea for a technicality. "My gun never left the holster. Your hand rested on the retention strap while you issued a threat of lethal force against an unarmed, compliant driver," Maya corrected smoothly. "Under Title 18 U.S.C., Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under Color of Law, you are looking at a minimum of 10 years in a federal penitentiary. And that is before I charge you with assaulting a federal agent." Higgins looked desperately at his captain, seeking a lifeline, a brotherhood shield that police often extended to their own. "Captain, Robert, please, I'm one of yours. We've worked together for 5 years. You're going to let the feds come in here and do this to a local boy?" Callahan's face was carved from granite. He stepped forward, invading Higgins's personal space, radiating a heat that was terrifying to behold. "You are a disgrace to that badge," Callahan snarled quietly, pointing a thick finger at the silver shield pinned to Higgins's chest. "You think I don't know what you do? You think I don't hear the rumors about how you treat people in the South Ward? I have been building an internal affairs file on you for 6 months, waiting for you to make a mistake big enough that the Union couldn't save you." Callahan gestured toward Maya. "You didn't just make a mistake, Higgins. You walked face first into a federal buzzsaw." The final shred of Officer Travis Higgins's arrogance evaporated into the thick night air, replaced by raw, unadulterated terror. He looked at the 2 rookies, Officer Miller and Officer Davis, who were now actively avoiding eye contact with him, staring resolutely at the asphalt. "Miller! Davis!" Captain Callahan barked, turning to the young officers. "Yes, sir," they responded in unison, standing at rigid attention. "Relieve Officer Higgins of his duty weapon. Strip him of his badge, his comms, and his taser," Callahan ordered. "Do it right now." Higgins's eyes went wide. This was the ultimate humiliation. To be stripped of his power on the side of the road, disarmed by rookies he usually bullied and forced to buy him coffee. "Captain, you can't do this without a Union rep present," Higgins protested, taking a frantic step backward, his hands hovering defensively near his belt. "This is a violation of my Garrity rights." "Garrity protects you from self-incrimination during internal administrative investigations, Higgins," Maya interjected, her voice cutting through his panic like a scalpel. "You are not the subject of an administrative review right now. You are the subject of an active federal criminal investigation. Your Union rep cannot save you from the Department of Justice." Miller and Davis slowly approached their senior officer. Miller, a young Hispanic cop who had endured his fair share of Higgins's harmless jokes in the locker room, looked visibly conflicted, but determined. "Travis, don't make this harder," Miller said softly, reaching his hand out. "Just give us the belt." "Get your hands off me, you little rookie piece of trash!" Higgins shoved Miller's shoulder, a flash of his old bullying persona surfacing in a desperate bid for control. Before Higgins could pull his hand back, Maya moved. She didn't use a baton or a firearm. She used leverage. In a blur of motion, Maya stepped inside Higgins's guard, seized his extended wrist, pivoted her hips, and drove her elbow sharply into his tricep while twisting his wrist backward. With a yelp of pain, Higgins was forced to bend at the waist, entirely immobilized by the joint lock. Maya pressed him firmly against the side of his own police cruiser, flattening his cheek against the cool metal. "I warned you about laying hands on people, Travis," Maya whispered in his ear, her tone chillingly calm. "I am not one of your helpless victims. Do not test me again." Okay, I yield," Higgins gasped, the pain in his shoulder blinding him. Maya held him there for another 3 seconds, making sure the reality of his utter helplessness sank deeply into his bones before she released the pressure and stepped back. Callahan nodded approvingly at the FBI agent. "Miller, Davis, strip him. If he twitches, tase him." This time, Higgins didn't resist. He stood shaking in the humid air as Officer Miller unbuckled the heavy leather duty belt, letting it drop to the asphalt with a heavy clatter. Davis unpinned the Silver Oak Creek police badge from Higgins's chest, leaving a torn hole in the crisp fabric of his uniform shirt. Higgins stood disarmed, defanged, and utterly exposed. He looked pathetic. "Agent Reynolds," Callahan said, pulling a set of heavy steel handcuffs from his own belt. "The Oak Creek Police Department officially surrenders jurisdiction of this suspect to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Would you like the honors?" "Thank you, Captain," Maya said, accepting the cuffs. She walked up to Higgins, grabbed his right wrist, and ratcheted the steel tight. She pulled his left arm behind his back and secured the second cuff. As the steel clicked into place, sealing his fate, Maya leaned in slightly. "Here is the twist of the knife, Higgins," Maya said quietly, meant only for him to hear. "I didn't just stumble into your jurisdiction tonight. You've been running license plates of unmarked vehicles parked near Councilman Pendleton's estate. You've been passing those plates to his private security team. You thought you were just playing the local heavy. You didn't realize Pendleton was using you to counter-surveil a federal racketeering investigation. Higgins's breath hitched in his throat. His chest heaved as the true scope of his nightmare revealed itself. He hadn't just profiled an FBI agent. He had actively interfered in a RICO case against a corrupt politician. We've had you on a Title III wiretap for 2 months, Travis, Maya continued mercilessly. We heard you agree to run those plates for Pendleton in exchange for cash dropped in your gym locker. I was going to arrest you on Tuesday. But you just couldn't help yourself tonight, could you? Your prejudice just expedited your own federal indictment. Higgins's knees finally gave out. If Miller hadn't grabbed him by the shoulder, he would have collapsed onto the asphalt. Maya stepped back and addressed the rookies. Place him in the back of my vehicle. Captain Callahan, I will need an evidence tech down here to secure the hard drive from Higgins's cruiser, his dash cam, and his body-worn camera. Maintain a strict chain of custody. Already on it, Agent Reynolds, Callahan replied, pulling out his cell phone. Maya walked back to her dusty 2012 Chevy Impala. She opened the rear door. Miller and Davis guided a weeping, broken Travis Higgins into the back seat, pushing his head down so he wouldn't hit the doorframe. Maya slammed the door shut, trapping him in the dark cage of the undercover vehicle. She turned and looked at the sprawling, affluent estates of Oak Creek. The neighborhood was quiet, the wealthy residents completely unaware that the corrupt foundation of their pristine community had just begun to crack wide open. The interrogation room inside the FBI Atlanta field office in Chamblee, Georgia, was a far cry from the affluent streets of Oak Creek. It was a windowless, 10-by-10 concrete box painted a sterile, institutional gray. The air conditioning blasted at a frigid 65 degrees, a deliberate psychological tactic to keep suspects uncomfortable and awake. In the center of the room sat a heavy steel table bolted directly to the floor, flanked by 3 rigid metal chairs. Travis Higgins sat in one of those chairs. He was no longer wearing his crisp, tailored uniform. He had been processed, booked, and stripped of his remaining dignity, now dressed in an oversized fluorescent orange jumpsuit issued by the Federal Holding Facility. His hands were shackled to a heavy chain wrapped around his waist. He looked exhausted, shivering under the harsh fluorescent lights, his eyes darting nervously toward the heavy steel door. At exactly 3:00 a.m. the door clicked open. Supervisory Special Agent Maya Reynolds walked in, carrying a thick manila folder. She was flanked by Special Agent David Carter, a tall, imposing man who served as her second-in-command on the Public Corruption Task Force. Maya no longer wore her casual undercover attire. She was dressed in a sharp, tailored black suit, her FBI badge clipped prominently to her belt next to her sidearm. She looked every inch the apex predator of federal law enforcement. She dropped the heavy manila folder onto the steel table with a loud, resounding thwack. Higgins flinched violently, his chains rattling. Maya pulled out a chair and sat across from him. She didn't say a word. For 3 agonizing minutes, she simply opened the file and began reading, deliberately ignoring him. She let the silence and the freezing temperature do the heavy lifting, letting Higgins's own anxiety tear him apart from the inside out. I want a lawyer," Higgins finally mumbled, his voice hoarse, cracking under the strain. Maya didn't look up from her reading. "You have one. Mr. Bradley Sterling from the Oak Creek Fraternal Order of Police. He's sitting in the observation room behind that 2-way mirror. He advised you to invoke your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent." It was good advice. Higgins swallowed hard, looking at the dark mirror on the wall. "Then why are you here? Why am I not in a cell?" Maya finally looked up, her dark eyes pinning him to his chair. Because, Travis, your lawyer works for the police union. His primary objective is to protect the department from civil liability. His secondary objective is to protect the union's image. You are a distant third on his list of priorities. He is perfectly fine with you taking a 20-year federal sentence if it means the Oak Creek Police Department doesn't get hit with a DOJ consent decree. Maya closed the folder and folded her hands on top of it. I am here, Maya continued softly, to offer you a lifeline that your union lawyer doesn't want you to take. Higgins leaned forward slightly, despite himself. What lifeline? Agent Carter leaned against the concrete wall, crossing his arms. Let's be clear about your current situation, Higgins. We have the dash cam footage from tonight. We have the telemetry from Agent Reynolds' vehicle proving your traffic stop was illegal. We have your body cam footage where you threaten a federal officer. That alone is a 10-year mandatory minimum under Title 18. Maya slid a glossy 8x10 photograph across the table. It showed Higgins standing in a dimly lit parking garage, accepting a thick manila envelope from a man in a tailored suit. But that's the small potatoes, Maya said, tapping the photo. This is a surveillance still from April 14th. That is you, in uniform, accepting $5,000 in cash from Arthur Pendleton's chief of staff. In exchange, you illegally accessed the NCIC database 52 times over 3 months to run plates for Pendleton's private security detail, helping him identify undercover federal agents. Higgins stared at the photo. The last of his hope drained away, leaving a hollow, echoing void in his chest. They had everything. He had been playing checkers while the FBI was playing three-dimensional chess. That elevates your crimes from civil rights violations to the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, Maya stated, her voice devoid of sympathy. RICO, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of a federal investigation. If this goes to trial, I will personally ensure the judge sentences you to 25 years in federal prison. You will be 53 years old before you see the sky as a free man. And former cops do not have a pleasant time in federal lockup. Tears welled up in Higgins's eyes. The tough guy persona was completely shattered. He was just a terrified, broken man realizing his life was over. What do you want? Higgins choked out, a tear spilling over his cheek and landing on the steel table. I don't want you, Maya said coldly, leaning forward. You are a foot soldier, a racist bully who got handed a badge. I want Councilman Pendleton. I want the offshore accounts he uses to hide taxpayer money. I want the names of every other dirty cop in Oak Creek who acts as his personal enforcer. Maya opened the folder again and pulled out a single, typed sheet of paper. She slid it across the table next to the photograph. This is a proffer agreement, Maya explained, commonly known as a Queen for a Day letter. If you sign it, and you sit in this room and tell me every single detail about Arthur Pendleton's operation, nothing you say today can be used against you in court. If your information leads to Pendleton's conviction, the U.S. Attorney will file a 5KC1.1 substantial assistance motion. Higgins looked at the paper as if it were a glowing, holy relic. What does that mean? The 5K thing? It means, Agent Carter chimed in, the judge can depart downward from the mandatory sentencing guidelines. Instead of 25 years, you might do 3 to 5 in a minimum security camp. It's the best deal you are ever going to get, and the offer expires the second you walk out that door. Maya leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. She knew she had him. The complete deconstruction of Travis Higgins was finished. He had pulled her over to assert his dominance, to make her feel small. Instead, he had handed her the key to taking down the biggest public corruption ring in Georgia. I suggest you read it carefully, Travis, Maya said quietly. "Your union rep will tell you not to sign it. But he's not the one facing a quarter-century in a concrete box. You have 2 minutes to decide." Higgins didn't need 2 minutes. His hands trembling violently, he reached awkwardly across his chains, picked up the black ink pen resting on the table, and signed his life away. 72 hours later, the affluent tranquility of Oak Creek, Georgia, was shattered not by a lone police siren, but by the synchronized, thunderous roar of 3 matte black Lenco Bearcat armored vehicles. It was 5:15 a.m. The sky was the color of bruised purple, and a heavy morning fog clung to the manicured lawns of the prestigious Willow Creek gated community. At the center of the neighborhood sat the sprawling, 12,000-square-foot estate of City Councilman Arthur Pendleton. For a decade, the estate had been a fortress of political untouchability, paid for by the stolen tax dollars of the working-class citizens living just a few miles away. Pendleton believed he was a king. He believed he had insulated himself with dirty cops, high-priced lawyers, and offshore bank accounts. He didn't realize his kingdom had been sold out for a reduced sentence by a terrified patrolman in a fluorescent orange jumpsuit. Supervisory Special Agent Maya Reynolds stood outside the lead Bearcat, fully kitted in FBI tactical gear. Her Kevlar vest bore the bold yellow letters of her agency, and a customized M4 carbine hung from her tactical sling. The dust and exhaustion of the traffic stop 3 nights ago were gone, replaced by the sharp, electric focus of an apex predator, closing in on the kill. Agent David Carter stepped up beside her, checking his radio earpiece. "HRT is in position at the rear exits. Warrants are signed, sealed, and active. We have the green light, Maya." Maya nodded. She looked at the towering wrought-iron gates of the Pendleton estate. Higgins's proffer agreement had been a gold mine. The disgraced cop had spent 6 hours spilling every detail of Pendleton's operation. He had provided the exact location of the hidden floor safe in Pendleton's home office, the names of 3 other corrupt officers on the payroll, and the routing numbers for 2 shell corporations in the Cayman Islands. "Take the gate," Maya ordered calmly. A specialized breaching vehicle, equipped with a heavy steel ram, accelerated. The devastating impact tore the wrought-iron gates off their concrete hinges with a deafening screech, sending them crashing onto the pristine, cobblestone driveway. Dozens of heavily armed federal agents swarmed the property, their tactical boots crunching over the shattered debris. "FBI, search warrant, open the door!" A voice boomed over a heavy bullhorn, echoing through the silent, wealthy neighborhood. Inside the master suite, Arthur Pendleton shot up in bed, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was a man in his late 60s, accustomed to waking up to the smell of freshly brewed espresso and the sound of classical music, not the terrifying, concussive boom of a battering ram obliterating his custom mahogany front doors. "Clear right! Clear left! Stairs!" The shouted commands of the entry team reverberated up the grand staircase. Pendleton scrambled out of bed, his hands shaking violently as he reached for his cell phone on the nightstand. He needed to call Captain Callahan. He needed to call his fixer. But before his trembling thumb could even unlock the screen, the double doors of his bedroom were kicked open with bone-rattling force. 4 red laser sights painted Pendleton's chest instantly. "Arthur Pendleton, FBI, let me see your hands. Drop the phone." An agent roared, advancing into the room with weapon raised. Pendleton dropped the phone as if it were burning coal and raised his hands, his face ashen. He was roughly turned around, his face pressed against the expensive silk wallpaper as cold steel handcuffs were ratcheted tightly around his wrists. 10 minutes later, Pendleton was marched down his grand staircase, still wearing his expensive silk pajamas, now disheveled and stripped of all dignity. He was led into his expansive, wood-paneled home office, where Maya Reynolds was waiting for him. Maya stood behind Pendleton's massive oak desk. She wasn't looking at him. Instead, she was looking down at a hidden compartment in the floorboards that the FBI search team had already pried open, exactly where Travis Higgins said it would be. Resting on the desk was a stack of physical ledgers and a black leather bag stuffed with $100 bills. Pendleton sneered, trying to summon the arrogant political power that had shielded him for so long. "Do you have any idea who I am? Who you are dealing with? I'll have your badge by lunchtime. You have no right to be in my home." Maya finally looked up. The cold, unyielding authority in her eyes stopped Pendleton's rant dead in its tracks. "Arthur Pendleton," Maya said, her voice echoing perfectly in the large room. "You are under arrest for violations of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and bribery of public officials." "This is an outrage! You have no proof!" Pendleton shouted, struggling against the two agents holding his arms. Maya picked up one of the physical ledgers from the desk and flipped it open. "We have the routing numbers for your accounts at the Bank of N.T. Butterfield in the Caymans. We have the wire transfer receipts from the Municipal Construction Fund. And we have this ledger, documenting every bribe you paid to Oak Creek police officers." Pendleton's face drained of color. His eyes darted to the ledger. He had kept it hidden for years. Only his closest confidants knew about it. Who told you about that?" Maya stepped out from behind the desk, walking slowly toward the disgraced politician. "A patrol officer named Travis Higgins," Maya said softly, savoring the look of absolute despair washing over Pendleton's face. "He pulled me over 3 nights ago. He thought because I was a black woman driving an old car, I was an easy target for his ego. Instead, he pulled over the lead investigator of the task force tracking your money. And when faced with 25 years in federal prison, he traded your kingdom for a lighter sentence." Pendleton slumped forward, all the fight completely draining out of him. The irony was suffocating. His entire criminal empire, carefully built over a decade, hadn't been brought down by a brilliant financial audit. It had been destroyed because one of his own hired thugs was too racist and arrogant to know who he was pulling over. "Take him out of my sight," Maya ordered, as the agents led a defeated Arthur Pendleton out the front door and toward a waiting federal transport van. Maya stepped out onto the sprawling front porch. The morning sun was just beginning to peek over the tree line, casting a golden hue over the chaos on the lawn. Captain Robert Callahan was standing by his unmarked SUV, coordinating with the FBI evidence teams. He had spent the last 2 days cleaning house, firing Higgins, and placing the other officers named in the proffer on immediate administrative suspension, pending their federal indictments. Callahan looked up and met Maya's gaze. He didn't say a word. He simply offered a slow, deeply respectful nod. Maya nodded back. She walked past the flashing lights of the Bearcats, past the shocked, whispering neighbors gathering on the sidewalks, and climbed into her dusty 2012 Chevy Impala. She put the car in drive, rolling down the window to let the cool morning air in, and drove away from Oak Creek, leaving the shattered remains of a corrupt empire in her rearview mirror. Maya Reynolds' story is a powerful reminder that true authority doesn't need to shout, and prejudice often orchestrates its own spectacular downfall. When a corrupt system tried to break her, she didn't just survive. She dismantled it from the inside out. Officer Higgins thought he had found an easy victim to bully, but he ended up handing the FBI the exact keys needed to take down an entire criminal empire. If you loved this real-life story of justice, resilience, and sweet karma, hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories.